What's up guys, Dylan White here, back at it with another video. If you like this content, please subscribe, hit the like button, and just help me out with this channel. So today what I want to talk about is the difference between being cheap and being frugal. And those are two very different things, and I think it's important to understand those things when you're considering saving money, making money, looking to become financially free. This is something that's really important that I think people need to understand a little bit better. Now, before I jump into that particular topic, I do want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the difference between being cheap and not being able to afford something. Those are two very different things, because I don't want people to feel like just because they can't necessarily afford something automatically means that they're being cheap. A lot of this has to do with an economics principle called elasticity. Elasticity of goods really just is the difference between wants and needs. So, for example, a good that is considered inelastic is something that, generally speaking, everyone needs, and even if the price changes and goes up, people will still be willing to pay that price. A good example of this is gasoline. Everyone needs gasoline. It's still the major player in how we get around using our personal vehicles. People really highly value being able to drive their own car versus taking public transportation. So gasoline is considered inelastic. Even if the price goes up $1, $2, $3, people are still willing to pay that price because they put a much higher value on being able to drive their own car than taking public transportation. An example of an elastic good, in contrast to that, is the type of car that you drive. Everyone needs a car, not everyone needs a Lamborghini. So this is a difference between inelastic and elastic. Inelastic goods, it doesn't really matter too much how much the price increases because people still need it. Whereas with an elastic good, you don't need to necessarily buy a Lamborghini. You can go buy a Kia and the function of the car still works. A Kia is not as nice as a Lamborghini, but a Kia will still get you from point A to point B. So it's important to understand that, because just because you may not be at the point where you can afford to buy a Lamborghini doesn't mean that you're necessarily cheap just because you have to buy a Kia, because that fits more within your budget. So with that said, I don't want people to think that just because they can't necessarily afford something right now automatically means they're being cheap because they went with something that is of a more affordable price. But when it does come to being actually cheap, and this is kind of the way that I define being cheap has an ulterior motive. Being cheap just isn't simply me making the best financial decision for myself, not going into debt, buying a Lamborghini when the only thing I can afford is a Kia. Being cheap is when you have this motive of basically trying to play the system, trying to get the best quote-unquote value when you know full well and good that what you're purchasing is not a good product, but you're trying to pass it off as being a good product because you just don't want to save up a little bit more money and get the better product. And I want to use an example that happened to me a few years ago. I went and I was in the market for a action camera, the kind that you can like bring underwater or mount on top of your helmet or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. And so rather than just saving a little bit more money up and then buying a more expensive GoPro camera, I decided to be cheap. I decided to go and purchase a cheap knockoff Chinese action camera. And in the short term, I was thinking, hey, this can maybe do all of the things that I need, and it's much more budget friendly. It's about a third of the price. That should have been a red flag. Now, did I need an action camera? No. Did I want an action camera? Yes. And rather than just taking the time, saving up a little bit more money, and purchasing the better brand camera, I decided to be cheap and I bought the knockoff camera. What ended up happening? 24 hours later, the camera broke on me. And just to double down on my example of cheapness, I decided not to purchase insurance on it. I didn't get the extended warranty. So not only did I just spend money on this camera, Not only did I not get the warranty, when it broke, there was nothing I could do about it. And it wasn't a small amount of money. I think it was maybe about $150, which, like I said, is still cheaper than a normal GoPro camera, but it didn't do me any good because the thing ended up breaking. So now I'm out $150, and if I do want to buy another action camera, I would have to then just eat that $150 loss and then spend even more money getting a better camera. You see how ridiculous that is? And so that's a good example of being cheap. It's where it's not like if I just didn't save up a little bit more money, I couldn't have afforded the GoPro. I could have afforded the GoPro if I just waited a little bit longer. But the motive behind it was I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to take the time. And I just wanted to get something I could pass off as a GoPro without paying the GoPro price. So that was me being cheap, and I ended up paying for it, literally paying for it. The thing ended up breaking on me. It just became an expensive paperweight. Had I not been cheap, I wouldn't have made that mistake. Now, the difference between being cheap, which I just talked about in my example, and being frugal is being frugal really doesn't have any sort of ulterior motive to it. Being frugal is just making wise business decisions and wise financial decisions with your money. Did you know that on average, Americans spend $1,000 a year on coffee? Isn't that insane? And when you actually do the math, it breaks down to about $20 a week on coffee. Do you know what you could do with an extra $1,000? Isn't that insane? And so to me, when I talk about being frugal, like I said, doesn't really have any ulterior motive. I'm not trying to get by or game the system or anything like that. Being frugal is just recognizing that certain goods are overpriced, and if you don't want to pay for those things, you don't have to. Black coffee is black coffee. When you're purchasing a brand like Starbucks, all you're really doing is you're just paying for the logo on the side of the cup that lets other people know, hey, look, I have some money because I can buy Starbucks every day. That's really the only difference between their black coffee and the black coffee you can make at home. In fact, you can even go to Starbucks, you can purchase their pre-ground bags of coffee for about $20. So imagine spending $20 a week just getting cups of Starbucks coffee, which will last you 1 week because you're buying it every single day. Or you go and buy one of their Starbucks bags of coffee for $20, and that can last you an entire month. This is how you know that the only thing that you're paying for is the brand, the cup that you're holding. Because if you can take their same product that they're serving to you in a single serving, and you can go home and take their coffee and you can just brew it for a month for the same price, clearly that's showing you that you're really just paying for the brand. So being frugal is just recognizing this. Why do I need to go and purchase something that's overinflated in price when it's perfectly acceptable and fine for me to just do it at home or not purchase it at all, because it's just not that valuable. So saving money here and there does not make you cheap. It doesn't make you cheap to go and just brew your own coffee at home instead of paying $3, $4, $5 every single time you go to a coffee shop. You're holding on to your money. You're making a better business decision. You're not playing into the marketing that they're trying to sell to you. Hey, you're not cool unless you hold this cup that says Starbucks on it. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to be crapping on Starbucks. I probably shouldn't even be saying their name, but I think it just helps people understand the issue. This is coffee shops everywhere. They all do the same thing. You're paying for the brand. You're not really paying for the product that they're selling you. So I hope that this helps sort of clarify the difference between being cheap and being frugal. To kind of recap, being cheap is really just trying to have an ulterior motive to skimp on getting a better product by going with it with a usually, and you can tell usually that it's an inferior product, but you're hoping that it performs as good as the more expensive product. Whereas with being frugal, you're just recognizing that certain things are overpriced and you're just choosing not to make purchases on overpriced goods, and that helps you save money in the long term. If you have any questions on this concept, I can try and break it down further, but I think that that's a pretty good starting point for helping people understand this, because I'm not telling people that they are cheap just because they make better financial decisions. Just because you choose to not go and purchase your coffee daily for $20 a week, and instead you decide to brew your own coffee at home and you're saving, $20 a week, doesn't mean that you're cheap. To me, it just means that you're being frugal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I understand that people still tend to get these things mixed up. And so if you have any questions, or you'd like some more examples, or even if you have some more examples of your own, if you understand this mindset and you'd like to help other people understand this mindset, just leave a comment down below. Really helps me out. Also, like I said before, please like, subscribe, and I will be back soon with another video. Thank you.